listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the Awards Watch Podcast, episode 279. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade, and joining me today is our associate editor, Sophia Ciminello.
Hi, guys.
And Karen Peterson.
Hello.
We're back. We took a week, 2 weeks off, I guess, and the Oscars are done, and we put those to bed. Karen and I did a good job with that. And then I went to South by and I saw some good movies. We're not here to talk about most of those movies, though it was a very fun festival and much needed vacation. Like, I don't know how much you can say a film festival is vacation, but it was, I saw a lot of great films there and a lot of interesting stories and things that were displayed there. But in between that time that we were off, we had two big movies that have come out from two big filmmakers. We've had a sort of American film from an international director and an international film from an American director come out. And so it's really nice to see Bong Joon-ho back at the cinema, as well as Steven Soderbergh returning to the screen, for the first time in 2 months. So we are here to talk about Mickey 17. We are here to talk about Black Bag. And I'm so excited to have you guys here to talk about them. How's y'all's time off though, Ben? Has it been, have you been rested? Are you ready to go for this? You know, now that the Oscars are over, are you still not recovered, or how are we doing, guys?
I've recovered. I was just thinking the last time I was on this show was when we were doing our final Oscar predictions, and I'm definitely in a different headspace now that they're over and I have some new movies to talk about. I've also been, I won't spoil what we're doing next week, but I've been preparing a lot for that episode. So I've been watching a lot of, older movies, and I think it's been really nice just to step away from the Oscar movies from this year and I don't know, just move forward. So it's been good.
Karen?
I tend to, after the Oscars are over, because I try to get so many movies watched in the weeks right before, I tend to just kind of step away from movies more or less and focus on TV. So that's what I've been doing. Just a lot of TV. This week, I somehow got sucked into The Traitors on Peacock.
Oh my God. That will come up when we talk about Black Bag.
I watched the whole season 3 in like 2 days. So
wow.
Yeah.
I've got to get to the studio because it was at South by and everybody's been talking about this show and that and it's on Apple and that it's like one of the best shows right now, new shows on television. And there's a lot of good shows coming out. We've got, Last of Us will be coming back, and Hacks is set to return in April, and then obviously Severance is going on still right now. And so there's a ton of television. We will be talking Yellow Jackets. We're going to be talking about a ton of television over the next couple of weeks because as somebody emailed Tyler literally hours after the Oscars, it's Emmy season, which I hate, which is like nails on a chalkboard to all of us as we're like, no, not yet. But no, that's great. I mean, I was the dumb guy that went to a film festival and saw like 20 something movies. So, but I've been doing the same thing when I've been at home and watching some comfort films to try to wash away the Amelia Perez's of the world, in the studio, in the season. What were you going to say, Karen?
Well, just to your point about like, have we gotten a break? Really, when you do film and TV, there's no such thing as a break.
No,
it's always award season.
No, I feel like there's always something to watch. There's always something to talk about. And that's why coming back, I knew that we had to talk about these two films. We'll start with Mickey 17, the latest film from director Bong, returning from from Parasite. This is his follow-up to Parasite. Remember Parasite, guys? Remember when that won Best Picture and everybody was united and there weren't, all these mean hit pieces and people were like still going on and on 2 weeks after the Oscars about a movie that shouldn't won, and like everybody was happy and excited even though we went right into a pandemic right afterwards. So like it was the last good fun thing that we had.
I'm jealous of your social media feed because mine was like a lot of people not happy about
That's what I'm saying,
Parasite.
Karen. A lot of people were not happy this past week.
Okay.
The last couple of weeks, and that's why I was like, I didn't really comment on any of it, but it was just like, wow, man, I went to South by at the right time, and everything.
Every year, the 2 to 3 days right after the
It's
Oscars
just
are
the
particularly brutal
burn it
online.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No matter what wins, no matter
Yeah,
what
no
it
matter
is,
what.
suddenly the movie that everybody loved all season becomes like the enemy, and it's not really that good, and it's
Yeah.
insufferable every year.
I will say though, I do think, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm just having fog brain this morning. I remember though Parasite winning being a massive celebratory achievement. There weren't a lot of people on my timeline, at least, doing that, Karen. I
Well, and that's
remember.
what I'm saying. I'm jealous of
I
your
know.
feed because mine was different.
Oh, for Parasite, really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes. There were a lot of people who were mad that it
1917
wasn't
heads.
1917.
Oh my God.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like, come on.
Stick to video
Like,
games.
Yeah, like, come on. Like, you guys want gimmicks to win Best Picture? Like, come on. Like, oh my God. Anyway, no one's talked about 1917 except Sam Mendes in the last 5 years, 6 years. But at least we've all talked about Parasite, which was a phenomenon, and people loved it. Yes, Karen. Yes.
I have the poster on my wall right
She
there.
does have the poster on her wall because she has a quote on that poster, if I'm not mistaken,
do.
right, Karen?
That's true.
So Parasite, very beloved film. Very interested to see what director Bong was going to do next. Obviously, this movie stars Robert Pattinson playing multiple versions of Robert Pattinson, Mark Ruffalo, Toni Collette, just to name a few in this cast. But this movie has taken a while to get to us. This has had its journey to get to the big screen. Obviously, it was financed by Warner Brothers, David Zaslav. Take that with a grain of salt as to why it's here. But now it's here, premiered in Berlin. Its box office has been decent for what it is, I think. I don't think it's a failure. I just think that when you delay a movie, the costs build up. And it's a blank check, which Sophia and Karen know. I love blank checks for directors, especially after they've made something successful and very ambitious like Parasite. So, Karen, I'm going to start with you. Mickey 17. Well, first of all, Karen, what do you think of director Bong as in his filmography? And then what do you think of Mickey 17 as a new entry in that?
Well, I love his films. I've seen every one of them. And I think that he has this very playful, quirky knack for telling stories about marginalized people who suffer at the hands of whether it's governments or corporations or whatever it is. But he does it in a way that doesn't necessarily, I don't know, it's not as heavy-handed as you might expect usually. Because of the fact that he has sort of this playful quality with him. Like his movies tend to have some humor to them, even in very serious situations. I think, one of the things about Parasite is that movie is very funny, unexpectedly so sometimes. And, The Host is another great example of that too. Going into Mickey 17, I wasn't sure what to expect. Just from the trailers, I was a little bit nervous about it because whatever voice Robert Pattinson was doing, I was like, I don't know if I can sit there and listen to that for 2 entire hours. But I have to say for myself, I adjusted to that pretty quickly. I actually thought Robert Pattinson did a great job. It's not that I haven't been a fan of him. I do think that he's a good actor. I just haven't necessarily loved a lot of what the projects that he's chosen. And so this one, I was just like, okay, I'm in on what he's doing. I like this. I really like the way that he's able to play two completely different characters that are also the same, but not really, but kind of. And I think he balances that in a really interesting way. I think overall the film is probably his most heavy-handed when it comes to messaging and what he's saying about the cult of personality and about government and about capitalism, all in the same themes. But I really enjoyed this. I thought it was fun. I didn't think that it was as good as some of his previous films, but I think overall it's he has a clear point of view. I really like the design of things, like this ship that's kind of falling apart that is supposed to be this salvation for people, but it's really a mess. And in everything that we see throughout as the story's unfolding, we see that there's, often this sheen that is supposed to look like everything's fine, but it's really not. And there's so much lying beneath the surface. And I really enjoyed the Toni Collette and Mark Ruffalo characters as far as how they are lambasting some of our current personalities. And I don't think there's one specific one that you can pinpoint. I think that they're kind of blending a few people together, but I think that it's done in such a way that it's hard not to separate this from what's really happening because I don't think you're supposed to. But I think that overall, I think what it's saying about not just where we are now, but where we're in danger of going, I think that it's very smart and I enjoy it. Again, I don't think this is as good as his other films. I think this is probably somewhere in the middle in terms of his filmography, but yeah, I thought it was well done.
Sophia.
Yeah, so I have been a fan of Robert Pattinson since Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire when he played Cedric Diggory. And then, of course, in Twilight, I went to see that too many times in
How
theaters
many
to
times did you
admit.
see that in theaters? The first one.
Well, so I rewatched it recently, actually, and I put this in my Letterboxd review, but Phantom Thread thankfully broke that record. But I saw it 7 times in theaters when I was in
Wow.
high school.
Okay.
So
Did you do the same
we
with the
were into it.
sequels?
No, I did not do the same with the sequels. Those unfortunately,
So you
it
were
went
you were
downhill. But
okay. You were
and some would
definitely
say
a
that about the
team,
first movie too.
definitely
Team
team
Edward
Pat
all the way.
Edward.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
please.
Okay.
But no, but I loved, I think he's just such an interesting actor and his choices after Twilight were interesting too because of that, like him pivoting away from this major franchise and he and Kristen Stewart both made some unique choices and clearly I think didn't like the fame that came along with it and wanted to make something different out of their careers. And I think they've both done that in very different ways, but this felt like a good choice for him in working with Bong Joon-ho, and I thought his performance was pretty fantastic going into these two versions of this character that are physically the same but have different personality traits. And I think he plays off of himself and the other characters in the film very well. And I just love him doing this almost Buster Keaton type comedy at times. I thought that was really exciting for him. The film as a whole lost me a little bit. I will say that these sorts of satires don't always work for me. I think the precision has to be there for me to really be on board. And this felt, and I apologize for saying this, but if you guys remember, Adam McKay wanted to make that series of Parasite. And I'm not sure what ended up happening with that. I'm very grateful that that did not come to fruition. But this to me felt like it almost had Adam McKay's fingerprints on it because it was so heavy-handed and obvious at times. And I think part of that comes from the fact that this movie just has so much on its mind. It's trying to do so much. And Parasite, the strength of that movie is that it exceeds because of its immense precision. That movie, one of the reasons I thought it was great that Bong Joon-ho won Best Director over Sam Mendes was because that movie is directed to a T. Like it is so precise and so perfect in its execution. And he seems to have such a grasp on that material. And here that felt a little bit lost to me. I think again, this sort of dystopian political social satire has such a high level of difficulty. And because we know that he can do that with something like Parasite, which was immediately before, it feels like a bit of a letdown when you see something like this that just feels messy and like there's just too much on its mind. I also think there's some great commentary here and there are great ideas. This idea of just being a cog in the system and Mickey's job as an expendable, that's such rich territory to mine, and I think it gets there sometimes. But then other parts of the story feel completely wasted, like Steven Yeun's character to me. I wanted more from him and what he was doing. He's one of my favorite actors, and I think he's such an exciting presence always, but this idea of this failed restaurant gimmick that they have, that's also an interesting idea. And that's something that's very much happening right now. But it just felt like it was unexplored because there was way too much to try to tackle. So overall, I'm fairly mixed on it. I'm glad it exists as a film, and I think especially in this space that we're in this time of year, these first few months of the year, it can be pretty rough with what we're getting at the movies. So to have something I think that feels at least like it's exploring some unique ideas and things that feel current and definitely of the moment, I think it's worth seeing, even though I'm not as high on it as I hope to be.
Yeah, so I think I'm kind of where both of you are at, and sort of weirdly in the middle of like, I think that this movie, I echo a lot of what you're saying, Sophia. I also did not have a bad time with it. I just felt that in terms of director Bong's career, movies like Snowpiercer and Okja clearly are a little bit, even though Okja I think is kind of very much similar to the tone of this movie. A lot of ideas being thrown around, a lot of it very on the nose in terms of the villainy, uh, and everything there. And also just so many characters being thrown into that movie, and yet that movie still feels more specific and focused on this singular journey of this little girl and this animal, that and that storyline, that everything's connected just to that. And I felt that even with the wild things that he chooses to do in that movie, it still feels grounded. Weirdly, I know that that doesn't make sense, but that's also a Bong Joon-ho movie. Like that's truly just him. Like, it sounds crazy on paper. If I explained Parasite out on paper, people would think that's insane. But then when you watch it, it flies by, right? And even Snowpiercer, to a certain extent, like, that is such an interesting concept, and and I think that, like, movies like The Host and Memories of a Murder, and these movies that he's made, he's got such a fascinating filmography. I do, though, think that while I love elements of this movie, the biggest element obviously is Robert Pattinson, who is one of the best actors I think we have working today. He makes the most interesting choices. He does the most interesting choices with the characters that he makes from those interesting choices. His voices, his mannerisms, his physical transformations. He is very much someone that, you're right, Sophia. He had a very, what was that, Tiger Beat persona, right? Being on All the Girl,
Yeah, I was into it. I'm a product
exactly.
of it.
And he was going to be sort of engulfed into that world, and he sort of refused, and he went into indie filmmaking. He's now kind of in this middle ground where, is he a movie star? Is he not? I mean, he's doing a movie like this, and he's doing a movie like The Lighthouse, but then he's Batman. So he can be all these things at once. He can be in a billion-dollar movie, and then he can be the lead marquee in a movie like this that is a bit of a risk, and also a blank check for its director. I think he's great. I think the movie, after it kind of catches up to where it's at currently in the film, because I think the first like 30 minutes of this movie, with the narration and kind of going back and forth with, telling Mickey's story and catching up with that, I was just like, okay, this is a little too much exposition, a little too much time to get us there. But then, weirdly enough, not like Sophia, like you said, not focused enough on some of the other characters and their relationship, and it clearly felt like Bong had just this massive attachment to this novel and really saw something inside of it, and was able to then take that novel and the specificity in that, and because that's only Mickey 7, and add 10 more. See, that's like an overabundance of even more death. But to honestly, that stuff I thought was really fascinating. the sort of looking into Mickey as an experiment and how the government will use and abuse and treat human beings or animals or whatever you want to, elaborate and how you ever want to use that sort of metaphor. I thought that was great. I thought the Stephen Yeun plotline was thin. I loved Naomi Ackie in this movie. I thought she had great chemistry with him, but it was more. But at times it just felt like she's just the girlfriend, and she's jealous of the other girl, and we didn't really get to know much about her and her backstory, at least as a soldier and an important cog in the machine there. That she sort of, I believe that they said that she gave up a lot of that, and then she obviously, by spoiler alert, she comes back into the fold later in the film. I Now the real problem with this movie is, for me at least, I was not a big a fan of Mark Ruffalo, and I didn't mind Toni Collette. Like that performance, I actually didn't mind, even though there are some aspects of that towards the end of the film where Collette returns to the screen with some scenes with Pattinson that I was like, oh man, this could have gotten easily cut out of here. Like this doesn't need to exist here at all in this moment. But I thought Ruffalo sort of taking his Poor Things performance and turning it all the way to like 11 was a lot. Now I understand the metaphor. I understand what he's trying to do. It's a little bit of, like you said, Karen, it's a little bit of Trump. I felt a lot of Elon Musk with the delay of this movie, which I believe it was kind of supposed to come out last year, coming out right during an election season. We did not really know to the extent of how much Elon Musk would be a part of our day-to-day lives outside of, X. And so seeing it now and seeing the choices that he's making, I mean, like the man that wants to go to space and owns this company and, and every sort of single beat that Ruffalo is making, it felt exactly on that, right on the nose. And especially if you know Ruffalo's politics, it was like, of course he went and took this role like that. It's absolutely the type of thing that he would want to do, to lampoon, to criticize that. But there's still within this movie, while so many things are being thrown out there, and I do feel, Sophia, I was getting a little bit of Adam McKay vibes through this. Director Bong still has something that is very unique that other filmmakers don't have. He has this ability of, while all this chaos is going on, stealthily sneak in some heart and put a soul inside a movie, even if the movie's not as good enough for for having the purposes of that. And I think the creatures designs, the creatures in this movie, the metaphor of that whole subplot with Pattinson by the end, it really worked and it was very effective. That man needs to stop making characters that I then attach myself to, because every time he does it, he does something deeply upsetting. And I think that that's something that other directors still can't do. Like, that's a testament to him, for you to attach yourself to a creature, to a person in here, and want to see good things happen to them. I think that that's a trick that only he's able to do. So it's a mixed bag, but man, I would watch this again specifically just for Pattinson, who is making choices as version 17 and 18 that are some of the best choices I've seen him make or actors make in a while. I think it's a really great performance inside a movie that is pretty messy, but it's a swing. And I admire a director taking a giant swing with all the cloud of having, quote unquote, one of the great films of the last 20 years under their belt and cashing in the chips. It's kind of what we're supposed to do with filmmaking. So while I don't love the whole experience, I've got to applaud him for going there at least. So it's a mixed bag, but it's one that I'm like, all right, much respect,
Well, and one thing I really do respect of what you started to talk about with, you get attached to characters and bad things happen to them. I think what I like about his movies is that I have trouble, as everyone knows, with directors like Darren Aronofsky and Lars von Trier, who
Oh,
make
that's not where
these.
thought you were going with that.
excessive, just like, oh my God, can we see one more bad thing happening to a character? And they feel mean-spirited, like the movies feel mean. This is different. I think that the characters do bad things to each other and the characters suffer because of the environments that they're in. But director Bong finds a way, like you said, to ground that suffering and to make it have a point and to also incorporate that heart into it too. And I think the creepers, that creature design and how they're used in the movie is a perfect example of that and what Pattinson's character, both Mickeys, are going through. I think that with the Mickeys, one of the things I would have really liked for them to explore, though, and this goes along with Nasha, the Naomi Ackie character, is that so they're printing out these versions that are supposedly the same, right? Like physically they're the same, but they're actually different in personality. And that is such a cool nugget here in this movie. But I just wanted to learn more about that from Nasha, like from her character, of what she's feeling that way. I think it's very funny. It's a great gag that she just wants to have a threesome with them. I think that's, I mean, I understand, I get it, but I think that
She is all of us at that point.
she is all of us. But that's so interesting that the corporation or this entity, right? They don't want multiples to exist. Multiples can't exist, but they're also not acknowledging at the same time that personality can be different or that personality is this other factor. So I wish that, if that was the point, I wish that they built that into Nasha's character a little bit more so that like what is she thinking actually that she has these two versions of her partner that are alive at the same time, but also that he is supposedly then different every single time. And how is she reacting to that? How does she feel about that? I would have liked to know that more, I think.
Yeah, the only time we ever get anything about that is from Mickey narrating that, oh, Mickey Six did this, and Nasha was like, okay, that's, and like him talking about her reactions to the different versions of himself. So I agree with you. I think that actually getting to see that instead of just hearing him tell us about it would have been more effective. I also wanted to just comment on the Mark Ruffalo character, because I do, yes, obviously there's some Trump, there's maybe some Elon, but I think there's also some religious icons as well.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where I think it's really interesting the way that he very directly calls out the blending and the blurring of the lines between politics and religion. And I know that he tends to have more subtle metaphors and satire in his previous films. I kind of think we're at a point where subtlety doesn't work on a lot of our modern audiences or present day. And people kind of just need to see it right in their faces.
No, I honestly, you're not wrong, Karen. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that blunt instruments to people's head is going to be the way it goes for a while because you got to crack into that brain.
Especially with politics and religion and how those really, connect and how they feed off of each other and are now with the world that we're living in. It's always been this way, but I think the veil is off really of how connected they are.
Well, also how hypocritical those are with inside religious organizations to support someone like
the same
person in charge
shouting,
right now. I'm not going to call them
the same people who've been shouting like church and state for years now want a blurring of that. They want it to go together.
Exactly. It's the massive hypocrisy that is behind of everything they say and do. And they 1 minute say one thing and then the other. And then you have this figure in the film that, it is an interesting figure. I just think that the Ruffalo plays it so large. And there are times where, and I think also too, like at times it's not as comical. I didn't find it nearly as funny as usually some of these characters, like Jake Gyllenhaal, for example. That is a large character inside Okja. And I at times find him to be funny, and then at other times I find him to be menacing and absolutely disgusting in that movie. And, and then Tilda's character in like something like Snowpiercer, like it's this blending of the line between like, yes, they're very sadistic, but there's something kind of comical and wormy about these people. And then like this one, I just felt like it was one note. There's for me, there's like no way of not saying that it was. That could be different for others, and that's purposeful, obviously, for sure. I just felt that Ruffalo couldn't nearly find as much nuance in this character. And maybe it's the way it's written because it is this blunt instrument. But I don't know. I also kind of felt like because we had seen Ruffalo just do a very over the top performance, I had felt like maybe somebody else, but then also again, tying in Ruffalo's politics, it makes perfect sense for him to be this kind of actor inside of this as well, too, to get that messaging going forward. So I did like him with Colette. Like, I thought that was a good pairing. I did think the moments of his insecurity and her sort of having to pep talk him up, I thought that was a very interesting layer. That felt very much like televangelists and the wives that are standing there on the side, like you're saying, Karen, that are very protecting of their man, and she's sort of singularly obsessed with one project. Also felt very much like Bush era sort of politics too, of like, I'll take care of literacy if you take care of killing everybody else. You know what I mean?
She's like a QVC celebrity almost.
Exactly,
like, that's what it reminded me of.
Obsessed with sauces, which I mean, like, come on, who's not obsessed with a little bit of sauce, right? Like,
you need a good sauce.
You need a good sauce. Like, you can't just, what is y'all's favorite sauce? For like a French fry or like for chicken or something?
I like fry sauce.
You like fry sauce? Okay.
Yeah. When you said sauce, I have to say my first thought went to I make a really good vodka sauce that takes like 2 hours. That would be Toni Collette her character would probably strive for that. I would say that kind of sauce dedication is what she's thinking.
Okay.
But I also love Raising Cane sauce.
That's good.
For a fry. Yeah.
Yeah. That was just a director watch tangent right there. I just had to ask it. It was something in my head while I was watching. Also, when Mickey's at that dinner and he's eating what is it, like pork tenderloin or whatever?
That's a good scene, but
that's a good
gross.
scene.
Yeah.
Another dinner scene. Then we'll talk about some dinner scenes here in a little bit. But I was just like, is he eating it? Just like, did they slice it right off of wherever they got it from? Like, it did not look cooked at all. It looked raw as hell. Like it was, but maybe
he's a great director of food scenes.
Yeah, he really is.
He's really good with food.
He's fantastic with it, and it usually the film turns at that point through those kitchen scenes or eating scenes, which I'll never forget being in the theater and seeing Parasite, because they're like eating all that food in the living room, and then the old maid, like rings the doorbell, and then all hell fucking breaks loose. And it's
or even just how he shoots that peach, like it just looks so perfect.
Exactly. Or where they're coming up with the scheme in that movie, and it's when they're eating, together as a family out and about, or the making of the rom nom. You know what I mean? I mean, there's just like. There's so much in Parasite. Like, we're not going to make this a Parasite review, but again, it goes back to the precision of that film, and every sort of turn in that movie is kind of around that. But like in this one, it's clearly, this is one of the big set pieces, the creature designs. I don't know. I weirdly kind of, with the creatures at times, I felt like Avatar was like in the back of his mind, like these people colonizing and leaving their planet to then take over another, and the communication of one individual with a horde of others. Like it was like, we've seen a little bit of this before, but it's just done in director Bong sort of way. And those creatures designs are really great. Like, I think he has like a really though it is very similar in terms of like just the gray character of something like Ocha, and then like of these characters too, but I don't know, they're so cute. I couldn't get over it. They're very cute.
Giant roly polies.
Mama. Yeah.
I know. I've got to like.
I've got roly polies too.
I've got to get like one. I think they're over at like Walmart now. They're selling them, which is the weirdest thing in the world to hear, that they're selling that corporation is selling these products.
I would love Director Bong's opinion on that. Actually, I feel like he could go for a very long time.
I feel like
about
they should
that.
just be putting this
Best
up on Warner
actor.
Brothers website. But Karen, what do
It'll
you
be in
think
the
about
swag bags at the end of the year.
it? Will be. God, I hope so. Karen, what do you think about Pattinson in here? In Pattinson in general as an actor?
Yeah, something that you were talking about, Sophia, with his choices post Twilight, really reminded me of an interview I watched years ago with Elijah Wood, and he was talking about some of the choices he'd made after Lord of the Rings and how that was so big and it was such a daunting, you know, shoot, and then all of the instant huge international stardom that went with it. It was very overwhelming for him. And so he intentionally said he didn't want to have anything to do with franchises for a long time. And that was, some of the choices he was making. And I was thinking about that with regards to Robert Pattinson and how he's chosen a really interesting series of filmmakers to work with and projects to take on. And he has, in the last few years, started to go back into the big franchises. But even then, the choices that he's making with bigger films, big budget studio movies, has still felt very not Twilight, and
Mhm.
in terms of he's still taking a risk. The Matt Reeves Batman film, that was a very different type of Batman film. And yes, that has its built-in fandom, but that's a role that a lot of people have already played, and it was going in a new direction, a new style. So him choosing that was an interesting choice. And then working with Bong Joon-ho on a film that is, a big studio movie, but it's also still a Bong Joon-ho film as well. And so I think that his choices have been very deliberate and very, very not Twilight. And yet I think because of the stardom that he brings with him, he's kind of elevated some of these films by who he is. And that's probably not even what he wants to do, but that's just kind of what has happened. And I think that he certainly is one of our few remaining movie stars, I would say, because he is able to bring some people to the theater based on his name. And I mean, when I went to see Mickey 17, it was a regular like Friday night screen, like just Friday night at the movies, and it was packed. People were really into it. So, and I think that he's an interesting actor. I really do. I mean, I was a little young for I saw the Twilight movies, but I was a little old, not young. I was a little old for those.
Young
Those
at
were
heart.
yes. Sophia's a little younger than me. So I wasn't into the whole Edward thing, but
Good for you. Honestly, you dodged a bullet.
I'm in that age demographic too, Karen, and I kind of sidestepped the Twilight stuff. But
it's
silly.
It wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I read the books just to know what I work at a college, so I try to keep up with what the kids are doing, but
it's like the Steve Buscemi gif. Hey, fellow
yes,
kids.
exactly like that. That is me all the time. But yeah, no, but I do think that he's very talented. That was obvious in the Harry Potter movie that he did, and and you see that in so many of the like was it Good Time, the one with the Safdie brothers?
Yeah.
Just really like he's very talented. He really is, and I'm glad to see him choose roles that let him be more than just a pretty face.
He has a James Spader quality to him. Like
yes.
That's what I like about him. He has this kind of like weird sex appeal, and he
Mm-hmm.
makes bizarre choices with who he works with, but it's always, I think he's not really afraid to go there in his movies, and that's why I'm excited to always about what he does next. And I love also that he's working with women who make really interesting choices with their films, like doing High Life with Claire Denis.
Yes.
Also making Die My Love, the new Lynn Ramsey film too. Like I'm just always excited whenever he's doing something new.
Yeah, I mean, like that was the thing when I was watching it. The film is, I was trying to think a lot about the film, but then I was also thinking about other things, including stuff that we were going to talk about in the show. And I was just thinking about Pattinson in general, and thinking about his career, thinking about now he is this, because I was thinking a lot about what actually Maya Hawke said recently in an interview about how people are cast in films and what that says about movie stars. And obviously we had a whole season where we were talking about one super movie star for their generation in Chalamet. And I was trying to think a lot about Pattinson because he's had such an interesting arc. And now he gets to swim in these waters where I do think he is a movie star. I think because of his past and the fan base that he has built from Sophia, our generation, and now he is Batman. Like, that is not something that you can take with a grain of salt. Like, if Tom Holland has this great career as Spider-Man, he is Batman. People are like asking him at the Mickey 17 premieres, when is that next movie coming? The success of the Penguin television show this year is connected to that universe. And it was a big deal. Like, and also to Karen's point, that is a very radical take on Batman. It's a very almost goth take on Batman. He's very, it's a reboot
He's
for
a
sure.
little
But
emo prince.
exactly.
Batman. That's
But
how
that
he
movie
interprets
is
it, which is great.
that movie was 3 hours long. It is more of a crime film. You see him as Batman mostly the entire time, not Bruce Wayne, and it made a good chunk of change. And was released in like March, so people were kind of nervous about all that. Obviously, nervous about him portraying that. And I thought he kind of knocked it out of the park. I think Matt Reeves is a great director, and I can't wait to see what they do next together. But I also think that, you know, him being cast in that role is because people trust him as an actor, as a box office draw. I think that director Bong put him in this role probably because he is such a, he saw him, I think, in The Lighthouse and in Good Time. But then a studio can feel safe with, like, this is the guy that also made the Batman movies and was in the Twilight movies. So he gets to do whatever he kind of wants and gets to carry these prestige directors' names over, the marquees to these big projects. And within most of these films, he has delivered good to great performances. I don't remember the last time he's given a totally bad performance. I was thinking about, what was that Chalamet movie, The King? And
Oh
he
yeah,
shows
he's in
up
The King.
as
But he's
this.
fun.
He's
I
so
forgot
fun
about
in
that.
that movie. He's incredible in that movie. There's and obviously, I was thinking about his stuff with Cronenberg, and that's such an interesting
Remember
twist.
his accent in that movie that I did not like, The Devil All the Time? Still doing
Oh,
something weird.
delusions.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, he's the most memorable bit and the most meme gift version of, from like the trailer and from the movie. Like, nobody talks about anything in that movie except Robert Pattinson slamming down at the podium, delusions. Like, he is very popular.
Love him
And
in Tenet, of course.
oh, how could I forget him in Tenet, literally playing Christopher Nolan
He wants a
in this
Diet
wardrobe?
Coke. Yeah.
Exactly. And oh man, I could talk. Well, Karen, I know you don't like Tenet, but he is very good in that film too. And so I just think that, but again, he's working with all these great directors. I mean, a movie that I even love, High Life, with him and Claire Denis. He's
Mhm.
absolutely fantastic in that film as well too. And that's a very different film than the films, any of the films I just mentioned as well. But he's able to get a movie like that with A24 from this great director. He's able to help get that movie, because that's a very weird concept on a page, just like Mickey 17 as well. And I kind of wish more actors were able to do this, but I don't think there are many actors that are to his status. I was thinking a lot this week when the news was announced about Barry Jenkins and Glenn Powell working together in an upcoming film. And I thought a lot about Pattinson, about the idea that, Pattinson can work with anybody. He's working with director Bong. He's working with Matt Reeves. He's working with Christopher Nolan. He's working with Claire Denis. He's working with Robert Eggers. He's working with all these people that, it's bleak out there, folks. And these people and these directors, they need some movie stars to help them get these films over the finish line. Not necessarily anybody with Instagram followers, but people that are known quantities for audiences to see and then can connect to these characters. And that's why, and also can give really committed performances. And that's why I think Pattinson's so good here. And all the flaws in this movie aside, he's the thing that just continues to push this movie forward. And it does stall at times, but you're just curious to see the decisions he makes. Like Sophia, you said, from 17 to 18 to all the, the 16 other versions. Like, that's why I kind of agree with you. I wanted to see more of those personality changes. I wanted to see how that affects everyone. I wanted to just see how that affects him and his job, and maybe, being more outspoken, or maybe this is 18's just finally to the point where I can't take this anymore. And an acknowledgement of like, I'm tired of being poked and prodded. I'm tired of being a guinea pig. And that would have been more of a self-reflection of the character that I felt like we could have had, rather than the, just kind of back and forth camaraderie between two Pattinsons, who I thought, I mean, he plays both versions just absolutely, I think, uniquely and fantastic, because he's a chameleon. I mean, for Christ's sake, he was the Heron in Boy and the Heron. So like, he's just great. And I do wish that Stephen Yeun and Naomi Ackie, they had a little bit more to do in this film, because I love those actors, and I think that they can add depth to Mickey's background and to his story. And one's supposed to be his friend, the other is supposed to be the love of his life. And so it would have just been nice to add a little bit of that to it. But there's just so much going on. I will say that, Karen, back to your point, the production design of this movie is incredible. The the ship itself feels vast, and endless, but it also feels suffocating at times too. And I was thinking a lot about, I was thinking weirdly about Star Wars and the young Harrison Ford when they're on the sort of snow on the planet, and it's snowing and he's running in it and everything. I was thinking a lot about Empire Strikes Back when it came to that, but I was just thinking about, like you said, Karen, Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin out in the snow and trying to survive out there. And I think that he sort of calls into that a lot in his performance. And it's just a very interesting film. And but it makes me nervous, because Warner Brothers is like kind of eating itself alive right now. They're pointing the finger and blaming themselves for what happened with Joker. And I think this movie is, what is being reported, it's going to lose them another chunk of change. They've got a Superman movie coming out later this year to hopefully reboot their entire DC franchise, but superhero movies are kind of up and down right now, even at Marvel. And then they have Sophia, they have another one of these director passion projects, if it comes out this year, from Paul Thomas Anderson, and it makes you nervous about what's going on over there and how they could handle that film, because it was so weird. I don't know if this was weird for you guys. The director that made Parasite, his follow-up movie, got so weirdly mangled and delayed, and and just treated and pushed out, like, into the world. It should have felt like we had this big lead up, right, to this movie, and it just weirdly kind of gets dumped at the beginning of March. I don't know if you guys thought that felt weird
Yeah,
for a
of
guy that
course.
was like 6 years ago celebrated as a master of cinema.
Well, and
Yeah.
how many release dates has it had this year?
Hmm.
That's
It's
very
been moved
fair.
all around the schedule just in the last couple of months.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very true. And then also, the movie it's been pushed around with a lot is Sinners from Ryan Coogler, his first original film since Fruitvale Station, which is a very, and take the buzz from that film what it will. I mean, we'll talk about that next month. I'm looking forward to seeing that. But, you look at what is happening over at Universal. They are fully committed to the auteur films and the auteur filmmakers making their visions. And they've got a slate of the next couple of years that's going to be very focused and very driven on that. Donna Langley is like living or dying by the voice of directors. And that used to be the calling card of Warner Brothers. And they're not, and they have these projects from these very, very good storytellers, some of the best storytellers. And it makes you nervous if they do this to someone like Director Bong. What will they do to Ryan Coogler, or to James Gunn, or to Paul Thomas Anderson, or anybody that works with them in general? I mean, they also have the Emerald Fennell Wuthering Heights film that comes out next year. And I know we can all go back and forth whether we're anticipating that or not, but that's an Academy Award winning writer director that has a blank check to make a project like that. And its release date is literally around the same release date as a movie like this. So you kind of wonder, like, what is going on over there? And it doesn't look good, at least for me. Sophia?
It does not look good. No, I mean, that was the concern around Mickey 17 really from the beginning, was just that it was at Warner Brothers. We know David Zaslav does not care about artists or directors, and it's really clear and proven, really, again, multiple times over with this movie. And you just think, I wonder what would have happened if it went to Neon or someone like that who really could have nurtured it and had the audience and found the audience for it. And Bong Joon-ho is a director who deserves that type of care, not to be just to have their film that was, yeah, the follow-up to a Best Picture winner that was historic, right? Like that's not what it's not what any filmmaker deserves, but I think here especially it's pretty disappointing. And I mean, we could go on really about the state of studios and how they differ in distribution, but this one was, I think, pretty disappointing. And Karen, like you said, I know you're in LA, I'm in New York, so our audiences are primed for a new Bong Joon-ho, and my screening was crowded as well. But they really, I think, could have built great word of mouth around this one too, and genre audiences always come out really to the theaters too. So I don't know. I think the rollout is upsetting, and yeah, I'm very curious to see what happens with the new Paul Thomas Anderson, of course. I don't know. I think as a filmmaker and with his audience, there's definitely a bit more power there than what Bong Joon-ho was afforded. But the powers that be could push it and could mess things up too. I have no confidence or faith in Warner Brothers.
No, and I don't, and listen, I love PTA, but that movie is not going to make any money whatsoever. Like that, it's not. His new movies have never made money. I mean, like for God's sakes, like at least director Bong, Parasite was made on $12 million budget. That movie made $260 million worldwide at the box office.
Leonardo
Like,
DiCaprio is in the movie, which will
that
help.
helps. That does help. You know what I
But
mean?
yeah, I
That's
mean
your
it has a huge budget too.
yes, it does. It has a huge budget and reportedly, just as big as Mickey 17, which is this is a sci-fi movie. That's like a
Yeah, I'm
action
like,
pull
what
it.
is he spending the money on? I'm so curious.
Yeah, and they're
Leonardo
shooting it
DiCaprio.
and they're
Leonardo
shooting it
DiCaprio,
on
yeah.
and they're going to have it on IMAX screens. I mean, it's a very bold idea, but these are very costly bold ideas as well too. And it does, and you can make those costly bold ideas just like in Mickey 17, but you have to have confidence within the filmmaker. Even something like look at Donna Langley, what she's done at Universal. She has confidence from Christopher Nolan to John M. Chu to the slate of people like Jordan Peele, and she's got. I think the Barry Jenkins film is going to Universal. To Steven Spielberg, like she's working with all these talented people. In the Daniels, they've signed a deal with them as well too, and it's like, hey, we will shepherd you and your vision all the way to the finish line. And there's no wavering on that. Even after we saw the Wicked trailer, right, which a lot of people were mixed on, that movie went and made a ton of money because they had the vision and the trust in John M. Chu. And it's a different approach within two massive studios. And you're right, Sophia, like for Bong, I would have loved to see him work with somebody like Neon Forever, but obviously they're not going to give him the budget to make a movie like this. They just
Yeah.
don't have that capacity. But maybe they expand hopefully soon because I feel like these studios, these bigger studios, to give these bigger projects, they're not giving as much grace as they should. Maggie 17 is in theaters. Please go see it. Just to help out old Bong Joon-ho. If you love Parasite, just go buy a ticket and see it. And that's the other thing too. It's wild. It's definitely bold. It may not work for you, but at least it's something original. And it's not like a Craven the Hunter movie or something out there. You know what I mean? Like it's something you're not going to see probably the rest of the year. And speaking of something you're not going to see the rest of the year, it's something like Black Bag, which is another movie that feels like it's from a bygone era, a mid-level adult drama, spy espionage film with barely any action in it, but with a hell of a cast. And it's Steven Soderbergh's latest film. I believe it's his. I had to check the notes. It's somewhere in the 30s for him. I think it's like his 36th film, 35th film, something like that. And it starts Michael Fassbender and Kate Blanchett. and Tom Burke and Naomi Harrison and Ray J. John Page and so many, and Pierce Brosnan, who was incredible in this movie. We're gonna talk about it. Uh Soderbergh we talked about Soderbergh recently this year. Trace and I were on this show talking about Presence, which I know, Karen, you were a big fan of when you saw it at Sundance, not this year, but last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Sophia, did you ever catch Presence?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah,
Did you like it?
I liked it.
Okay.
But Steven Soderbergh's filmography, which we'll talk about, is
Well, we're going
very
to talk
up and
about it.
down for me. It's really all over the place. I think, as many of his movies as I dislike outright. It's very interesting just looking at them as a collective.
I love an old soda pop. You know, I can
Hmm.
watch him anytime. He's such an interesting director. Yeah, there's some I don't care for, but but man, when he's on fire,
But then
there's
he has
not
Out of Sight.
there's not many others that can do it, man. He's still got it, and I'm curious to hear what you guys have to think about Black Bag. Sophia, I'll start with you. What did you think of the latest from Steven Soderbergh?
Yeah, so I reviewed Black Bag for the site and I really enjoyed this. I am not a big action movie person. So sometimes even in spy thrillers, the action I will kind of tune it out or it'll
That
just be like, okay, let's get to the
It's the
next
same
thing
with
here.
sci-fi, by the way, too.
Same with sci-fi.
You're not a
Yeah.
big sci-fi
Well, but
person.
the sci-fi films that I like are much more grounded. They are looking into the characters a bit
Hmm.
more. And this I thought was just a great throwback actually to those 60s and 70s spy movies that I really like. I thought its focus on characters and dialogue was really strong, and that's what really kept me on my toes and connected to the story. I will watch anything with Kate Blanchett except Borderlands. I didn't catch that one, of course, but I will
Put it
watch
on your
anything with
list.
her. I love that woman so much. And I thought that this film perfectly suited her strengths as this woman who is very icy, but also very capable of this savvy sophistication. And I really just loved all of the supporting players too. I think in particular, Marissa Bella is pretty wonderful as this character, Clarissa. What a 180 she's had. Last year around this time, I reviewed her film Back to Black, the Amy Winehouse biopic, and this is a pleasant move forward for her. She's also fabulous in Industry, a show that
Same
I also
performance.
enjoy.
Same performance, right? She
Yep.
was great in Back to Black. She's great in this, right?
The issues with Back to Black, I would say, are not fully her fault, but I'm happy she has this. That is what I will say. And I think what I liked about this is just it has this high drama at times too, and that ultimately this is a film about marriage and relationships and the concept that it's actually encouraged to date within your company or to date in the workplace because it keeps secrets is a really interesting one. And I think Soderbergh and screenwriter David Koepp really make a meal out of that. And yeah, I love the idea of black bag as a phrase. I'm going to start using that. If someone ever asks me something I don't want to talk about, I'm just going to say black bag. It's really funny how it works as sort of I wrote this in the review, but the tone of the movie, I think, plays perfectly with the title because black bag feels like a safe word and also something that is a common saying at work that, keeps things close and keeps topics off limits. And I think that play off of both of those concepts of work and of sex is why this film succeeded for me. So I really liked it.
Karen.
Well, at this point in 2025, and the year is still young, but Steven Soderbergh has my two favorite movies of the year so far.
I love it.
I, yeah, I mean, I like you said, I saw Presents last year at Sundance, and I was eagerly anticipating it all year, and then it finally came out. When it got a January release, I was just like, "No, what are you guys doing?" But yeah, so then we get two Soderbergh films in the first quarter of the year. And I agree with you, Sophia, I agree with pretty much everything you just said. I think that his filmography has been somewhat mixed for me. I probably like some of his films more than you do, uh, but it's not, they're not all winners. Like there's an interesting blend of films that he's done. But one of the things that I love about Soderbergh is that he's so willing to try things, and he's so willing to let things not work, and it's okay, and he just moves on to the next. And I really admire that about him. And I think because he's so willing to try things, you end up getting some really interesting films that that might not have happened if he was more cautious, and if he took the time to really think through and just took more time with making movies. So I love that kind of just, let's just see what happens. But I think that with Black Bag, I think this does feel much more like a very thought out, very considered, very deliberate film. It's a very tight 93 minutes. And what he does with that time is so smart. And it feels very controlled. It feels very calculated. There's not a misstep in this film, I think. And the way that he's able to do so much where you're in very limited locations, you don't spend a lot of time in a lot of places. You get to see glimpses of what's happening in other places, but so much of the action is at the house and at the office. And that's all you need. And what he does with it is just so precise and so good. It's so gripping. And I feel like I kind of saw where it was going really early on, but it didn't feel predictable. It didn't feel like it was ridiculous or anything like that. I was just engrossed in seeing how this was going to play out and how the truth was going to come out with these characters. And it's sexy, it's funny. It was actually much funnier than I expected. And I agree also, Sophia, what you said about this feeling like a throwback to these great 60s spy thrillers, where it's so much more focused on the dialogue than it is on any sort of action. And I think it's great. I think every actor in this is just doing great work, and they're so fun to watch together. And yeah, I absolutely love this movie.
You guys taste that? You guys got that feeling of a banger from Soderbergh? This movie fucking
a crispy
rules.
soda pop.
Oh my God. Okay, so I was in the middle of South by Southwest Film Festival. And you guys have been to film festivals. Plenty of these. Karen, you've been to South by. They're not all winners, folks.
I met you at South by.
Yes, exactly. They're not all winners. It can be a rough festival at times too. And you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting for a really special film. And I saw the day before, I did see a really special film that I'll talk about later this year when it comes out from this festival. And so I went to a press screening, and I was looking forward to it because you got me sold. You got Soderbergh, who he may not be one of my guys, but he just makes interesting choices. And Karen, to your point, he doesn't make the same film twice in a row. He is willing to go outside of his comfort zone. He is willing to make, just look at the two films that came out this year. He's making a handheld ghost from a movie from the perspective of a ghost, 90-minute coming of age horror movie, right? Ghost story. And then he's making a sleek, sexy, complicated, star-studded ensemble piece in the world of espionage. It's like, okay, and it's the same writer, it's the same director, different cast, obviously. And he's mostly, long before the Sean Bakers of the world, there were people like Steven Soderbergh that did every single thing under the sun on their films. And he does the exact same thing. He shoots the film, he edits the film, he's writing, he's directing. He's doing too much, probably. And yet, I'm like, okay, I'm excited for this thing. And this movie started. And I was lucky enough to edit Sophia's review of Black Bag. And when she was telling me that it's like, doesn't have a lot of action, it's just a lot of talking, I was like, that's fine. Because Sophia knows I'm a sucker for espionage films and spy movies. I love these things. The Bond films, the Mission Impossible films, the Bourne films, and just any film in between Jean Le Carré are books that I've read a ton. I can go back and forth on a spy novel, like, and become obsessed with them left and right. And they were some of the first like novels and movies that I saw when I was a kid. So like the very, very like, near and dear to my heart. And Kate Blanchett, Michael Fassbender, two actors, absolutely love. Anything they're in, sign me up. Let's go. They're playing a married couple. Oh, and she's like, maybe a double agent. Okay, cool. Where do I get my ticket? So I sat down, saw it was 95 minutes. I'm like, well, if this is bad, I'll be in and out in 90 minutes. It's never a bad thing. And I was like, okay, by the end of it, I wanted another 90 minutes. Like this world is so good and so rich. And to Sophia, your point, it's all about relationship dynamics. And this movie is, yeah, it's weirdly of a bygone era, because nowadays in the workplace, you are frowned upon, if not forbidden, to have any office romances whatsoever, to have personal relationships. It's in and out of the office. There's no like, it's very just like clock in, clock out, get on with your life. And this movie is like, what if we just said, you know what? Things are a hell of a lot more interesting, a lot more messy if everybody is interconnected to the point of absurdity. And these dinner dates or these chances to have these team huddles, as you were, are the most dangerous and the most revealing thing that you could possibly do. And nobody in their right mind at any company would want to do it, but it's a room full of spies. So of course they would be interested and know so many intimate details of each other that then you're able to put all inside this covert, top secret word that only they would know. And it becomes a very playful thing between Fassbender and Blanchett and the entire cast of just dropping one single line, black bag. And that contains multitudes inside of it. It almost felt like, weirdly, like the bag that Hermione Granger has in Harry Potter. It is like deep within the secrets, and you got to go down in there to find out what is actually the truth. And this movie does a great job of not getting in its own way. That's the best thing I can say about this movie, is this movie knows what it wants to do. It doesn't try to go down convoluted avenues. I saw some way too convoluted movies over the last couple of weeks where people are just like, the simpler, the better. And they had the same runtime. They had less materials, and it was all on the page. And I think David Nobe's script is perfect. This is like just one of the best scripts I've witnessed on screen in quite some time. It's complete, again, 180 from the work that he's done with Soderbergh before, or really anything in his, that he's done in his career. And it just, I don't know. I was getting a very sexy, like overtly sexy version of Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy while I was watching this. And I think Fassbender's phenomenal. Sophia mentioned it in the review, like to see him in sort of his spy era where he's playing, where he did it in The Killer and he's now doing it here. This is his comfort zone. He probably, he's talked about recently that he auditioned for Bond, but it wasn't like, it didn't work out, and Craig got the role. This feels like kind of that audition again, even though he's probably way too older for the role, but I actually like it prefer here and I feel like this is like him being this sort of investigative person, but the idea of George not liking liars to the point in which like he would turn in his own father, which is very funny, but also reveals a lot about loyalty and what that means to him. And if his wife is on this list, how far will that loyalty go? Like, even though he's saying, I'd kill for you, and she's saying that, they're also born liars as well. There is lying in that. So the idea of someone saying they hate liars, even though their job is to mostly lie to the enemy, to the person they're chasing after, is a very interesting thing as well. It's probably not something we haven't seen before, but it feels very fresh for Soderbergh. It has the Out of Sight vibes. The score is absolutely incredible. The movie moves at just a fast pace. And by the end of it, yeah, Karen, I agree with you. It wasn't too surprising where it ended up, but I can't lie, I wasn't on the edge of my seat and just thrilled and just like had a massive grin on my face. And I think that this is like one of the great films that we've had in the last 2 years. Like this was like fucking movie. And I was so into it. Yeah, this is like the best film of the year so far. And it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard to top it because I'm gonna go back to this movie a lot. It's gonna be very rewatchable, I think, too. I've been thinking about it a lot the last couple of days since I saw it. Really want to see it again. Yeah. Who wants to take it?
I yeah, I wanted to comment on Soderbergh editing his own films, and I don't want to throw shade on our recent Oscar winner, but
Here
I
we go.
do think well, yeah, I know I said but, which negates what I just said. But the thing is that I think very few directors should edit their own films. And it's not just about, Sean Baker. It's I think anybody. It's a very precarious thing. You need somebody that can rein you in. And the propensity for overindulgence is there for a lot of directors. And one of the many things I admire about Soderbergh is that he doesn't do that. He's one that really does understand that he has to let go of things to really keep it tight and to keep things moving. And he has, we throw the term auteur around. He really truly is one. He has a vision and he's able to see it through. And a lot of times, I would say most of the time, it's successful, at least to some degree. And I think that this is a perfect example. I think the polygraph scene, the way
Oh,
that is
It's
filmed
so
and
good.
cut together
Hmm.
is an exact, like, it's such a perfect representation of what he is capable of as a director and a cinematographer and an editor.
I agree with that. And thinking about him never doing the same thing twice, or, the inspiration that he had really for this movie of those 60s spy movies, I love. And I feel like we should at least call out David Holmes for the score. The score was
Mhm.
so much fun. That's definitely going to be one of my most listened to scores this year.
Yeah.
I that had that real like retro London quality to it that I really liked, but also just it's still his own, I think, and he's taking it to a very modern place by looking at workplace relationships in this new way. But he's also, I think, putting in so many clever references to these spy movies. Like if you think about George being the character's name, I was thinking a lot about George Smiley, right? Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. Michael Fassbender to me, and I put this in the review, he looked like Michael Caine. Like that's who
yeah.
he reminded me of. So I was also thinking of Michael Caine in those movies as the, Harry Palmer character. But then too, I don't know if you guys caught the Pigeon Tunnel, the Errol Morris documentary that came out, I think 2 years ago. I think it was 2023. But I really enjoyed that just as a person who loves spy novels and spy fiction and John le Carré. But I was thinking about how much of that documentary and of his life as an author was so complicated by his relationship with his father. And he talked about that dynamic and of the trust issues there and how that influenced his work. And I loved how when they're at that dinner scene at the beginning, what does George Woodhouse, Michael Fassbender's character, talk about? He mentions this relationship with his father. It comes up through the other characters as a way to, as a kind of a key trait for him and connecting it to the polygraph, which comes up later. And one of my favorite parts about that scene, which I think is just absolutely diabolical and great and so fun, is that you start with this premise that just feels so good, and again like something we would have seen in those old movies, but also like reminded me of The Traitors, the show, when he's like, we have a traitor in the house, we're at this table, we have to find out who the traitor is. And he creates this game that is so unhinged. I laughed immediately when he's like,
Yes.
you have to create a resolution for the person to your right. It is something it's straight out of the Real Housewives. I was giddy. I was giggling this whole entire scene. It was great.
It's also a man creating chaos when he's also a
Hmm.
very precise person. Because we see in those
Yes.
moments before he's making this meal, Tom Burke and them walk in, they're late, and he gets just a couple of spots, just a little bit out, and just a little bit of the juice from the meal that he's cooking on his shirt, and he has to completely change his outfit. And it's to one, keep up appearances, but it's also in a lot of ways that's who he is. He is calculated, precise. He knows that even as he throws this hand grenade of an idea into this dinner, he knows what he's doing. And I love that when the dinner is done, even though he's also at the time not telling Catherine that she's also under his eye, right? In this investigation. When she asks him, "Did you find what you are looking for?" He says, "Mostly," and he's keeping everything close to the chest. But I love that her too. She's such a fascinating character as well, in that she is a shapeshifter. She is able to sort of move through this world much more effortlessly than I think that even George does. And she has even a sense of power and a sense of a position that's even higher than her husband, because she almost feels like she's second in command, because she almost was Pierce Brosnan's like counterpart, if not almost like above him and passed over for that position and everything. And the way in which she's able to, you know, we uncover information about Catherine very quickly in this film. And then their bond that they have, it's very playful. It did remind me a lot of of a the connections that Soderbergh has in his other films. But it really, yeah, I mean, Out of Sight was a movie that I thought about a lot, but that's between a criminal and 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 an agent. Like, this is between two people of the same side of the coin. But there's this complicatedness of, like, yes, I can say these things, but with that safe word still out there, there is a potential of at any point. And that's why, even though conventionally you think this movie's going to go the way it does, and it does, there's that hint of fear that the audience has, and I think both Catherine and George have, of being double crossed, because that's the profession, that's the job. And even when they do uncover it, there is an acknowledgement between the two characters of what their duty is at that point. But it's, you still wonder, is because George is calculated, because even though when he makes a mistake, he realizes that he can't not make another one, and it's more internalized than actually spoken out, right? You see the sort of terror when he makes a mistake in this film on his face, and I think Fassbender portrays that so perfectly when it's walking out of a briefing where Pierce Brosnan, to your point, Sophia, says, "Find the leak." And I think that by the end, he doesn't just throw a hand grenade in the second dinner sequence. He like fires off a bazooka in that room. And yeah, it's very campy and very fun, but also extremely entertaining and interesting. And I, uh, I was laughing the entire time, and my audience was too. I think that why it's so interesting that, like, I think it got like a B cinema score or something like that. And again, maybe it goes back to what Karen was saying earlier of, like, we had to beat people with a damn head over with some films. Like, this feels like a very straightforward sort of film, but people um, have lost subtlety in it. I My audience ate it up, and we were all, it was a mixture of critics, but then also normies, and everybody was having a great time. There was a lot of laughter in this movie. It's a very cheeky film, and yeah, I mean, like, Soderbergh. This might not be the last time we hear from him either. He has the Christophers that he's working on right now, which I believe he's close to wrapping that up, if not close to editing that. So we will maybe see him by the end of this year. if not early next year with another project. And the man moves at such a pace that is insane. I mean, I want to ask you guys real quick, like, because Trace and I did the exercise last time, and obviously you can give some more thoughts on Blackback, but I wanted to ask you guys what your favorite Steven Soderbergh films were.
Yeah, I mean mine is definitely Out of Sight.
Out of
That
sight?
was I think his best movie, and I know on your old version of Director Watch with Jay, the three of us talked about it. That was actually my first podcast with the two of you, which is funny.
And then it's been
I
all downhill ever
It's
since.
yeah,
Yeah.
it really has. I love I love Aaron Brockovich. I think that he's so good at working with movie stars, and that is just an incredible movie star performance from Julia Roberts. And I
Another
mean,
year where he did two movies.
another yeah,
Yeah.
he's so economical. And then of course, I mean Ocean's 11, there's so many that I love.
Yeah.
Magic Mike.
Yeah.
He really does have so many good ones, but I would say those are the ones that rise above the rest for me.
Karen?
I mean, I don't want to be super basic, but
So the good
it's
German.
I
Um,
actually like The Good German. I know I'm in a minority there, but I actually do. But no, I mean,
Shape
Ocean's 11 is
Shape Part
just.
Two. Yeah.
I also really love Ocean's 12. I know a lot of people
Yes.
I
have
like
a
it
certain
too.
feeling
Yeah.
about that. I think it's so good.
Yes,
And
Karen.
to the point that both of you made about how he doesn't make the same movie twice, his Ocean's trilogy, they are all different.
Yes.
13 has a lot more similarities to 11 because they're both set in Vegas, but even those three, they are not the same movie. And I love that 12, which is set in Europe, just feels like such a European film. I love that.
Such an anti-sequel at times
Hmm.
too. Like
Yeah.
I'm making this, but I'm gonna make it very weird and have these meta qualities that are all throughout there. I mean, there was sort of some of that hinted at in the first one, but he fully dives deep into that. I mentioned a lot of them on the show, but I think Damon's performance in The Informant is one of his best that he's ever given. I think
Yeah.
Behind the Candelabra is a movie that I think about a lot in terms of Soderbergh and how, I mean, he makes biopics or, stories based on true stories. I think he does a really great job with that. Aaron Brockovich and Behind the Candelabra are these really interesting examinations. And I think that's what he's really good. I mentioned High Flying Bird on that episode too. I think it's sort of the best of his iPhone era movies. And I mean, his last couple of films have been really interesting. I mean, you look at like Let 'Em All Talk, and then you look at Kimmy, and you look at these two films that have come out this year. I mean, and then you had the third Magic Mike film, which again is, to your point, Karen, is very different than the first Magic Mike is very different than Magic Mike XXL, which I mean, he didn't direct it, but he pretty much had, like helped out all the way through with that production. And then the third one is not anywhere like those other two, and it's very weirdly like anticlimactic in like the best way possible. And
It's
it's
so funny.
it's got some
You're
interesting
just like, what's
choices.
going on?
Exactly. So I think that Karen, to your point, he's such an interesting filmmaker and keeps sort of shape shifting and evolving because he's adaptable and he was talking recently. I saw an interview, I forgot where it was, and he was talking about this is a $50 million movie. I think it made like 12 million dollars at the box office this weekend. Like if it doesn't do well, it doesn't reclaim the money back. Like what is what do you have to go back to streaming? And he goes, yeah, if that's where I have to make movies like this, I'll have to. Like, or if I have to go back to making something like Presents, which is a much smaller budget than something like this, like I'll find, you have to be able to adapt if you want to keep making movies. And so he's seen the highs where he's had $100 million budgets, and he's seen, and he's made more intimate things that are very interesting as well too. But he's also making a lot of movies now that are tighter, more focused. They're like 90 minutes to 100 minutes, and yeah, you can either like them or not. They can have a great time, or they've got some interesting things to say, but they're never like, I don't think that except The Laundromat, which is a terrible movie. Um,
Yeah.
he's really not made anything that I overtly hate. He's just made some movies that I don't particularly like
Hmm.
over his others. But I mean, like, shoot, he was like one of the number one directors everybody was watching a film from because when we went into the pandemic, Contagion, which is
Mhm.
an excellent movie,
Mhm.
shot up
I
like and
love
everybody was
Contagion.
watching that movie.
Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent Jude Law performance in that movie. And
Hmm.
then Side Effects just a couple years later, before. But
Well, even movies like Unsane, which I don't think totally works, but I
yeah,
like the attempt. I like the effort to it. I think that there were some things that I personally would have done a little differently with it. I think there's two really good ideas that kind of do battle against each other,
yeah,
um, but I appreciate what he's trying to do with that. And that's so much of even the films that I don't necessarily like, just what I was saying earlier, I like the effort. I also have to say that 8 years later, I love that the Winds of Winter joke in Logan Lucky is still
yes,
relevant.
Yeah.
still relevant. Also, just absolutely, that was like kind of the feeling weirdly I had with Black Bag was the one I had with Logan Lucky, where it was going back to I wouldn't necessarily say the same lane, but the same speed in which Soderbergh had us before. Because like Logan Lucky feels very much in the Bag of the Oceans films, right? And I thought Black Bag felt a little back into the speed of Out of Sight, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
and and it's just kind of like, oh, so he can go back to this if he wants to, but do it in such a different, more complicated, but then also very stylish way and not lose any of that. And that those movies being like 25 years apart, at least 30, yeah, like 30 years apart. Um, and to know that he's still making films like this, like it's a testament to him as a filmmaker. And yeah, back to the film just real quick. Everybody's great in this movie. There's not a bad performance. Sophia, I saw your letterbox review. I
Hmm.
have been holding my stock for Tom Burke for a very long time,
I bought it
and
so early
and
and I'm cashing in.
he
I
was
don't know how
great in this
finance
movie.
metaphors work.
He's so good.
He's great here. Naomi Harris is wonderful. Um, what was her name again
Marissa
from
Bella was my favorite.
Marissa
She's the
Bell?
She's
best.
so
So
good.
good.
The scene with her when she's at her like it's just
She's
sometimes
at her
these movies
desk.
too, I love when the characters have like these, very specific, highly technical jobs and she's just click clacking away at that keyboard as they're getting into the surveillance system. And that's also, I think, like even though her character and the Michael Fassbender character, George, they don't have a relationship outside of a working one, really. That is a very like sexually charged scene between them as they're surveilling his wife and trying to figure out her location. And I loved that. I think that's also just some of Soderbergh's best work really here in that movie. He just knows how to build tension in a scene and that it's so funny too to see these characters because they can now also be more different and they know how to play off of each other and she knows how to manipulate him, I think, very well.
Well, I mean, it
Hmm.
goes back to
Yeah.
her version of her session in the polygraph exam, which
Is
is
your middle name Beatrice? No.
no. Is your middle name Beatrice? Like just she's having the time of her life
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
getting under his skin, much like you said, Sophia, in before when he's testing her or getting under her skin, and
Hmm.
Fassbender's able to just sort of, you know, and her have this weird sexual energy dance and play each other, but that's just obviously espionage and spy work at their finest, being able to pinpoint the not necessarily weaknesses, but the points of vulnerability, and play off of those people so well and get them into and get them to show their cards, which I feel like this entire movie was like a game of poker and trying to read the other person. That's really what spy work is. And then yeah, I think Reggie John Page is really great too. But Pierce Brosnan, can we just like say Looking great. All the suits in this movie, all the clothing in this movie,
Yeah,
just incredible
Pierce
work.
Brosnan is a silver fox. I'm
He
just
is.
he
saying.
is. He is. And he
Yeah.
showed up as like, you were Bond.
Hmm. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. I saw somebody online the other night go, MGM should just get him as M, or get Kate Blanchett as M, or get Michael Fassbender as M. You know what? Just get everybody in this movie to be M, because that's what this movie is. It's a movie of M's. And yeah, I mean,
Well, that was my thought with Marissa. My first thought with Marissa Abella, I was like, "Oh my God, she would be a great Bond girl." And then I was like, "No, wait, I'm not going to limit her to being a Bond girl. She could be a Bond
Hmm.
in in the new version."
well, yeah, I mean, that is true. Like, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson aren't there, so it does open up the door. Though,
Hmm.
I mean, Jeff Bezos is in charge, so I don't think that will happen. But
Yeah,
She could still be a 00, even if it's not 7.
that's
right.
very true. That's
True.
very, very true. Though I most likely they'll probably put her as Money Penny, and that would be really sad. But um, but no, I was thinking about also that too. At the end, I'm like, man, I want Steven Soderbergh to make the next Bond film. Can we get that to happen? But like, there's no way in hell that'll happen, and that he would do it, because those Ocean's movies too are to go back to those real quick. As much as we love those movies, he almost like killed himself making those things because they were so complicated and so big. But if I was Amazon, I'd be watching a movie like this going like, holy shit, like we should get this guy right on board to make that movie, because he's able to bring so much tension and character development without any action. There's two points of action in this movie, and there and one of them is at a table, and the other one is like silent without with music playing in the background. So yeah, I'd sign up for it easily, but I kind of don't want it to happen because I love Soderbergh playing by his own rules, which yeah, anybody that goes and signs up for that Bond series right now will probably be under the rule of
Yeah.
of a billionaire at this point.
I just also wanted to mention we have a former Bond in this movie and a Money Penny because Naomi Harris was
That
Money
is
Penny.
true.
Hmm.
And she was wonderful. And she was an agent
Hmm.
before she was Moneypenny. So
See,
that
there
does
you go.
play.
There
There
you
you
go.
go. So see, she could still play that role but also be a double O. It's one of the best movies of the year, easily. Please go and see it a couple of times because it's only 90 minutes. So, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it as the year goes on.
No, I
Karen,
will be.
yeah, I will be as well. I think Sophia will be too. I think that.
Oh yeah.
Will you see it 7 times, Sophia?
No, I will not see it 7 times, I don't think, but I not in theaters, but there's a possibility
It's
over
gonna be
the
a rewatch.
years
Yeah, it's gonna be a
because it's
rewatch.
so rewatchable, and I'm
Yeah.
already excited to go again.
Well, it's got Kate in it. Kate's
Well,
great.
yeah, my
Yeah.
Queen
I
Kate.
mean,
I
she's
love Kate.
wonderful. Love her wig in this thing.
Love Kate as a brunette.
Yeah.
That was perfect for me.
Wonderful. Karen, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet as we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, you can find my written work at awardswatch.com. And you can also find me on my other podcasts, Citizen Dame and The Watch and Talk. And then you can find me on social media. I am on Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd at Karen M. Peterson.
Sophia Ciminello.
You can find me on Twitter at Sophia_Sim, Blue Sky at Sophia Sim, Letterboxd at Faye Dunaway. You can find my podcast, Oscar Wilde, wherever you listen to podcasts. We're on a little break right now, but we'll be back next month with a brand new season. And you can find my review of this movie and other interviews, reviews, and more podcasts at Awards Watch.
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Blue Sky at Ryan McQuade 77. If you like podcasts, we have the Director Watch podcast, and we are wrapping up our Mike Nichols movie series this week with a review of Charlie Wilson's War, a movie that we all love and remember from 2007. And stay tuned for that this week. We recorded that with the great Tom O'Brien on that episode, and then we will have a bonus episode next week and in the middle of the week. So you'll get 2 Director Watch episodes next week, not this week, next week. as well as you'll find out on the episode this week who is our next. Well, you already do know who is going to be actually our next movie series because we spoiled it at the top of the series, which is that it's going to be Elaine May. And that episode would be A New Leaf, and that will be with the great Karen Peterson back on Director Watch.
Oh.
And having to put up with our shenanigans as well over there.
Someone's got to do it.
Someone's got to do it.
Turn over a new leaf. For
Oh, there it is. There it is. 5 stars on iTunes and Spotify. We greatly appreciate it. While you're over on the website, please sign up for the newsletter. I know award season's done, but we're going to have a ton of Emmy stuff coming up. We're going to have a ton of reviews from various film festivals like South by. So it's the best place to get all the news, reviews, interviews, and podcasts all under one place. Next week, we will be back, and it's a good old-fashioned retrospective where we are going to be talking about the films of 1980 and the year in which Ordinary People won Best Picture. And looking at the lineup and knowing the people here, this should be a very fun and jam-packed house for this. I'm super excited. I know Karen and Sophia and Jay and others have already been doing the research and going through the archives and watching films in prep. Jay has been watching movies like a fiend for this thing. So,
having some interesting opinions. I can't wait to unpack
very
it next week.
Interesting opinions. Yes, it should be. We'll do the actual episode around a dinner table in honor of Black Bag.
Maybe I'll stab his hand.
Yeah, I'm saying, maybe the loaded gun game's played. Who knows? Keep your kitchen knives away from everyone as we go through another fun Awards Watch Oscar retrospective next week. So thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you all next time.